Hey, welcome to the first Monday edition of the Big Me Kickoff. I've read your comments. A lot of people are like, hey, we want a little bit more of this. So here we are. We're going to give it a shot. We're going to look at the weekend that was, look ahead to the next weekend, talk a little bit about college football playoffs, and kind of go from there. My goal later this week is to have a guest on our normal Friday show. Still working on that. You've heard me mention a couple names of people I'm shooting for, but I've just not managed to lock anybody down yet, but that's coming. So keep an eye over at Buckeye Scoop or in the comments here. I will try to tease that out. But again, my name's Kevin Noon. It's the Big Me Kickoff, and I want to thank you for taking some time to either watch me on YouTube or listen to this through any of the great Buckeye Scoop podcasting avenues that we have these shows on. We have talked about the Purdue-Ohio State game at length on various shows, so I'm not going to get into a lot of depth on it, but I can't do a show and not talk about it, so let's go. 59-31, Ohio State has a 45-17 lead at half. Ohio State, is up 35-7. Blink of an eye, it's 35-7. This game's in hand. I mean, obviously, Purdue has showed something with its passing game. Was it as much about Aiden O'Connell and David Bell and some of the other guys? Or did Ohio State just go very vanilla? And I think that's going to be the big question that we're all going to have to examine this week. Was it a case of Ohio State getting up by 28? I mean, heck, they were a minute 30 into the second quarter when they were up 28 points. And they say, look, we know we've got this. We know we can kind of move the ball at will. The chances of everything falling apart are slim. Let's not sell out on pass rush. Let's not keep everything in front of you. Keep everything in front of you. And there were a couple of times that Ohio State didn't keep things in front of it. And Purdue went for touchdowns on those plays. I mean, it's plain and simple. You sit there, you look at an Anthrop, 9-yard touchdown pass, 29-yard Milton Wright. There were not these huge bombs for Purdue, but with that being said, I don't think that the last line of defense played its best games at various points, and don't let anybody get behind you. Sounds great, but didn't necessarily equate. And that's why you're looking at a Purdue team that throws for 390. They throw 52 times. I mean, they rush for only 91 yards. And honestly, I'm surprised Purdue got to 91 yards. Purdue is not a very good running team this year. Xander Horvath was only playing, I think, in his fifth game. He got injured during the season. King Doru, 36 and 26 yards apiece. Jackson Anthrop had a couple of runs for 22. David Bell had a designed run for 7 yards. Nothing significant there. No run went for longer than 11 yards. I'm still kind of shocked. I said during a Buckeye Scoop pregame show, 55 yards about where I see it. 55 to 91. It really doesn't mean a whole lot in the grand scheme of things. But with that being said, could I have been right if Ohio State did get a pass rush? And credit to Jeff Brom, credit to Aiden O'Connell. They got the ball out of O'Connell's hand very quickly. So it wasn't like a situation where Ohio State was going to have 8 sacks. But if Ohio State had a couple of sacks, you get the sack-adjusted yardage, and you take 20 yards off of that, then you're at 71 yards. I mean, I'm a little bit closer in the ballpark, but whatever. I will address something that people have brought up to me. I did not see a 59-point output coming from Ohio State. I had this Ohio State not covering, but winning still relatively comfortably. I think I was, what did I have? I was like 34-21, something like that, or I don't even remember. I didn't see it. I did not see Ohio State coming out and having that kind of success. Rushing for 263, throwing for 361. I thought Ohio State might bog down a little bit more. I thought we might see a little bit more of the Ohio State issues that we saw against Nebraska and certainly against Penn State. I thought that the Purdue defense was going to play better. I really thought the Purdue defense was going to play better. But before I just sit there and say, oh, the Purdue defense played bad, the Ohio State offense played great. The Ohio State offense played very, very well. And when this Ohio State offense plays very well, I don't care what the defense is. I don't care if they're top 25. I don't care if they're top 10. There are a couple out there that still kind of concern me. Georgia, Wisconsin, potentially in a Big Ten championship game. I'm not a big buyer on the Alabama defense this year. I think that they have some great parts, but I think the sum of the parts, when you get to the whole, I don't know if the whole is as good as what we've seen before. But Ohio State, 30 first downs. They were. I'm kind of going through my cheat sheet here. They converted on all but one drive in the red zone, and that was a kneel down. They got 4 touchdowns. One was a field goal, a 30-yarder by Noah Ruggles, who's now 16-16, moving up the record books for single-season numbers for Ohio State. Very impressive. But everybody would like to see him be kicking point afters, not go for ones, not threes, because that means the 6 is already in the books. They'll be going up against Michigan State, Michigan, potentially a Big Ten championship game, and then whatever the postseason has in hand. He's probably not going to get to 25. That was what Mike Nugent was. He was 25 of 28 in 02. That means 9 more over potentially 2, 3, 5 games. I mean, it's not out of the realm of possibility. Do you get to play 5 games if you're having to attempt that many field goals? I don't know. I don't think so. Unless you've got 7 touchdowns to go with it. I mean, if you got 7 touchdowns, you're putting up 49 base, and then you're, adding a couple more to get to 55, 58. Sure. But if you're getting to 58, unless it's going to be 58, 55, you're probably calling the dogs off anyway. You're probably not attempting field goals. So I don't know. I don't think he's going to get to Nugent's record, but what a pickup he was in the portal. What a pickup. Nobody was talking about him. I remember I was sitting at Ohio State. I was at the Woody Hayes Complex Center during a camp, saw on social media North Carolina transfer portal kicker Noah Ruggles going to Ohio State. I'm figuring out, do I need to write this? Do I not need to write this? It's just a kicker. I think we wrote something. I was at my previous stop. I wasn't at Buckeye Scoop yet. Talked with, one of my staffers. Was like, hey, we probably should put something up. So we did put a story up. But I don't think anybody anticipated the impact that Noah Ruggles was going to have. He's had a field goal in every game but Oregon. Multiple field goals in several games, to get to 16. He's 16-16. For the number of kicks that he has, to remain perfect at this point is pretty impressive. We're just not going to say anything jinx-worthy. We're just going to move right on. So Ohio State now has Michigan State. And Michigan State obviously is a top 10 team. But how do you have, somebody texted me, how do you have a team that is, 7th? And a team that's 4th and an 18-point line? That is a significant line. That is a huge line for 2 teams in the top 10. So it just goes to show that there is a belief that the top 3, top 4, whether or not you believe all 4 teams in the top 4 belong there. There's some debate on Oregon. People debating on Ohio State. I think that's unfounded, but people debating on Oregon for, just for a couple spots difference in the rankings, to have such a huge disparity in terms of the line. And I'll be curious to see where that line ends up, because everybody's coming to me. It's like, that's too many points. That's too many points. Well, we were all saying that last week about Purdue. That's too many points. Proved not to be. I fell into that trap. But I fell into that trap after thinking Ohio State was going to wax Penn State. And then after that game, I was like, well, Ohio State will figure it out and wax Nebraska. Didn't do that. So, what happens there? Does Michigan State end up being a trap game with Michigan on the other end? There's just no way it can be a trap game with them being a top 10 team. I mean, we've talked about it on the pregame show with Tony Gerdeman and Tom Orr, that there's going to be a game that Ohio State's going to play that whether it's a flat or just something about it, that there's going to be a game that they may not be as sharp. And then I brought up the point, what if that non-sharp game was Nebraska? And what if they're sharp for all these games? Because very few teams go through and win all their games by 14, 17, 21 plus points a year. You're going to have a couple of tighter than needed games. I mean, UGA has been pretty impressive in what's been going on, but I've not been super impressed with most of the SEC, but I'm not going to take anything away from UGA because I think whatever schedule you throw at them, unless you really piecemeal a murderer's row, I think UGA is going to be able to do that. I think you just have to be better than UGA on that specific day. You don't have to be better than UGA over the course of the season. You have to be better than them that day. Ohio State in 14 was not better than Alabama most of the season, but Ohio State was better than Alabama that night and won. And that's what you have to do. And we've gone off on a tangent away from what we're talking about. I got Michigan State here in front of me. Michigan State obviously, dropped a 40-29 game against Purdue at Purdue. We don't play the transitive property here. Well, because Ohio State whacked Purdue and Purdue beat Michigan State, therefore vis-a-vis, that doesn't work that way. But, let's look at Michigan State's schedule. I mean, Michigan State has been very close in its last 4 games. A 5-point game at Indiana, a 4-point win where it really came from behind to beat Michigan, the 11-point loss at Purdue, and then, a 19-point win against Maryland. But, Maryland has proven to be pretty meh. They held Maryland largely in check on the ground, 101 yards given up, but Maryland threw for 350. And then you look on the other side, Michigan State ran for a $194, throws for 287, 4 touchdowns, 1 interception. They've had interceptions in the last 5 games, throwing them. And I mean, we're going 1, 1, 2, 2, 1. So we're at 7 interceptions over the last 5 games. There's talk of Kenneth Walker III being maybe a little gimpy after a little bit of an ankle injury. We'll have to see what comes out of that. But, it really comes down to the game that I'm going to focus on the most for Michigan State is what Michigan State did against Michigan. Because Michigan statistically was the best pass defense that Michigan State faced, was the best pass efficiency defense that they faced. It was the best scoring defense that they faced, was the best rushing offense that they faced. Ohio State certainly tops the charts in scoring offense and rushing defense, but Ohio State has given up 261.5 yards per game. But that's not, again, and if you read anything that I write over at Buckeye Scoop, it's not about yardage, it's about points. And that's ultimately what happened. So Ohio State is only giving up 20.2 points per game. 261.5 yards of passing offense doesn't mean anything if you can't cross the goal line. It doesn't mean anything if you can't do something with it. The passing efficiency defense is 128.96. I'm not going to get into how that formula works. That's good for 54th. I mean, they slid back after playing Purdue to a certain extent. I mean, that was to be understood. But, I look at that Michigan State game because at least it was the team that Michigan State played with the best pulse. I mean, Michigan State did go against Western Kentucky, who has the number 1 passing offense, but has the 123rd rushing offense. So that's certainly not a balanced offense. Michigan even is not that balanced with the number 13 rushing offense and the number 77 passing offense. But I look at it more for on the defensive side. So what was Michigan State able to do in that game in terms of offensively? They threw for 199. They passed, or they ran for 199. They threw for 196. So Michigan State ended up having a balanced game, but it wasn't particularly a fantastic game in terms of output. But 5 touchdowns on the ground. That's ultimately what's going to be the case. 5 touchdowns on the ground. When Kenneth Walker just goes ham like that and goes nuts and does that. That's why I like Ohio State's rush defense coming in at, the number 13 rush defense, better than the Michigan rush defense. I mean, 105.9 to Michigan's 123.1. Ohio State hasn't faced a great back since, we can sit there and talk about Oregon. I mean, Oregon had with Travis Dye and CJ Vedral had a good 1-2 punch. I don't know if either of them were better than Mo Abraham for Minnesota, but Mo got hurt in that game, and he'd already rushed for, what was it, like 160? Probably would have gone for 200, but that was a week 1 Ohio State team that played him, and some things have changed since then, and we're not going to belabor that point. But some things have changed. The rush defense has gotten a lot better, but I think Ohio State's really going to be tested by Kenneth Walker. So I think it's going to ultimately come down to what happens with the Michigan State passing game. What are we going to see out of the quarterback there? What are we going to see in terms of what's Reed going to be able to do? He's coming off of 8 catches for $114, 2 touchdowns in the most recent game, but you go to the previous 3 games and he does 4 for 70, 6 for 80, 4 for 73. What's going on there? What's the status of Jalen Naylor? Is he going to be good to go? I mean, we obviously know what it means to have 2 receivers versus 1. I mean, Ohio State has 3. And when Ohio State was down to 2, obviously Jackson Smith and Jigba went off and had a huge game, but Ohio State did not have Garrett Wilson. Garrett Wilson of the 4 touchdown variety in the most recent game, 3 via the catch and 1 on the ground. First player ever in Ohio State history to do that. But we'll have so much more on that game coming up this week. Haven't even started Tail the Tape. You're just getting some of the advanced numbers that I've started to dial up for my research on Tail the Tape. So you might read some of those things. I'll probably find some new stuff. Let's look at the week that was in terms of college football. And a lot of people wanted to talk about that Georgia-Tennessee game. And I think I even said that I think Tennessee could make it interesting for a little bit. Well, Tennessee goes and scores 17 points. That's interesting. Maybe not all of that newsworthy in the grand scheme of things when you mention that Georgia scored 41. But that's the most that Georgia's given up. 3, 7, 13, 0, 0, 10, 13, 7, 6, and then 17. I don't think we're going to see Georgia give up 17 in the next 2 games combined between Charleston Southern and Georgia Tech. I don't know how much people are going to be able to go to school on that game, but again, I look at this schedule and, Arkansas was well thought of at that point. Arkansas was like 25th this week. I mean, they were 8th at the time they played them. They shut them out. Auburn, they beat them 34-10. Auburn, released the news that Bo Nix is done for the season, but he played in that game. Kentucky somehow was 11th at that point. I don't get that one, but 30-13, but they've also played some dreadful offenses, UAB, South Carolina, Vanderbilt, Florida proving to be pretty dreadful, just period. I mean, having to claw back to beat Sanford, whatever it was, 70-54, and then celebrating like they won the national championship. How they've fallen. So I don't know. 40-17 or 41-17, interesting there. Alabama wins 59-3. Oregon kind of middling around again. That ended up being 38-24. It was, they were up 24-14 after 3 quarters. I don't know. I mean, I understand having to say the head-to-head matters, absolutely. Ohio State lost to a then number 11 team in the nation. But that team also lost to an unranked Stanford team. So head-to-head absolutely has to mean something. But losing to Stanford has to mean something too. And there are just a lot of people out there like, I don't care. Head-to-head has to be the ultimate arbiter. We have to live by that. And therefore, that's what's going to happen. Ohio State didn't lose to an unranked team. So I don't know. I think that this could be the week, and we'll talk about college football playoffs here in a minute before we wrap up. I think this is the week that we could see Ohio State move above Oregon, because it really sounded like from Gary Barta that it was about, well, we have them ranked very close to one another. I mean, in terms of what our metrics are and what it is that we're seeing kind of on the back end. But neither team the previous week did a lot to exert themselves and to put themselves head and shoulders above anybody else. Well, Ohio State, even in giving up 31, put up 59 against a then ranked number 19 ranked team. Oregon won by 14 against a Wazoo team that dumped its coach due to political reasons, and just leave it at that. A Wazoo team that's now 5-5, 4-3. So, I mean, certainly not Stanford in terms of being kind of, but, they didn't go out and beat a top 19 team. So I don't know. Michigan beats Penn State 21-17 in a game that set back my love of football by 20 years. Oh, it was not fun to watch. Cade McNamara 19-29, 217, 3 touchdowns. The immediate overreaction I got from a lot of fans that are friends of mine is, oh my God, Cade McNamara is going to throw for 11 million yards against Ohio State. I'm like, have you watched Cade McNamara? Have you watched that offense? If you cover Eric All, I think you're fine. Penn State didn't cover Eric All on a very slow-moving touchdown. You know, I think that they have, some interesting concepts on offense. They had no Blake Corum. Hassan Haskins can move the pile. I mean, he is a pile mover. I'm very impressed with what they're able to do in their ground and pound on with him. But without Blake Corum, that's an issue. And we're not sure. I heard the pregame sideline announcer say that they were expecting not to have him for, I don't remember if it was for 2 games or at least 2 games or 2 more games. Whether or not that encompasses Ohio State or not, you know that Corum's going to do everything he can humanly possible to be in that game. It's the game. You absolutely try to play in it, but I don't know. I don't think, without Blake Corum, I think that offense is greatly diminished. Only putting up 21 in that game. I don't know. Michigan State 40-21 over Maryland. Baylor finally knocking off Oklahoma, handing Oklahoma what it will probably be the first of at least 2, if not 3 losses on this year. Not impressed with Oklahoma. Never was impressed with Oklahoma. I mean, Caleb Williams has certainly done some things, but Oklahoma has kind of farted around and finally played a team that was able to punish them. I mean, Caleb Williams, 10-19, buck 46, 2 interceptions. I don't know. I don't see Oklahoma getting through Bedlam, and Iowa State, I think, could be an issue too. I don't know. Notre Dame won a very ugly 28-3 game against a depleted UVA. Oklahoma State rolled TCU. Ole Miss beat Texas A&M 29-19 in a battle of ranked teams. Wake Forest beat NC State in a barn burner 45-42. Auburn let a big lead 28-3 get away to lose 43-34 to Mississippi State. As I said earlier, Bo Nix done for the year. Wisconsin rolls Northwestern. Iowa beats Minnesota. San Diego State wins by a deuce over Nevada. UTSA wins by 10 over Southern Miss. Utah is 9 better than Arizona. And Arkansas goes to overtime to beat LSU. So that's your look at the top 25. But let's talk a little bit about the college football playoff before we call it a show. Again, thank you for joining me here on this first Monday edition of the Big Me Kickoff. I am your host, Kevin Noon. If you're watching us on YouTube, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Hit the bell. Don't miss out not only on my content, but all of the great content put up by all the great staff members here. And if you're listening to us on iTunes, Spreaker, SoundCloud, just be sure to subscribe to the channel. Don't miss out. It's a lot of great stuff. And the reason I say that is tomorrow, on Tuesday, we will do our live reaction show to the 3rd edition of the college football playoff rankings. Will we see shakeup? You go through, and the top 7 teams won. Number 8, Oklahoma loses. Notre Dame wins. Oklahoma State wins. So, there are a lot of people saying, well, we're not going to see any change in the top 4. And those who don't have it in front of you, it's Georgia, Alabama, Oregon, Ohio State. I wouldn't be surprised to see Ohio State move up. I really wouldn't. And I said it just 5 minutes ago. Gary Barta said some things that lead me to believe that there is the chance that Ohio State finally putting its foot down and winning a game decisively could mean something, whereas Oregon didn't. I mean, so what could come from that? I think Georgia, Alabama 1-2 are fine right now. It doesn't really matter. They're going to play each other head to head. It's fine. Cincinnati's sitting at 5. I mean, Cincinnati, I didn't even really talk about them because they played on Friday. They kind of putzed around. They I don't know. I don't see it. I just don't see the committee giving any love to the group of 5. I don't know. And is this Cincinnati team better than other top group of 5 teams that have been hanging around in past years? Cincinnati's schedule is not very good. If I sit there and I say, well, Georgia's schedule isn't very good. Georgia's still playing in the SEC, and even if the SEC East is toilet bowl, it's still. I'll take a team out of the middle of the SEC East and put them in the AAC and bet heavily on the team from the SEC East. That's just how it is. So I don't think that the committee really buys it, and the AAC commissioner can go out and complain and stump and lobby all that he wants. It's not going to change the fact that when you're putting on games between Tulsa and Tulane and they have a combined 3 wins at the time that they play each other, nobody's going to respect that. If Houston plays well down the stretch, or that's Cincinnati's best ticket right there. Houston being as highly thought of come the AAC championship game, and somehow riding Notre Dame's coattails, because Notre Dame is playing toity teams down the stretch too. That UVA game, if UVA was healthy, if Brennan Armstrong was healthy, that could have been more of a game. But obviously it wasn't, 28-3. So I don't know. I mean, I've seen some people saying Notre Dame really could backdoor its way in. The ACC is done for. The Big 12 is done for. If you put 2 SEC teams in, that's 2 spots. If you put a Big 10 champion in, that's 3 spots. If you're not going to put Cincinnati in, what do you do? Does that open the door for Notre Dame? I don't know. I don't see 2 Big 10 teams getting in, because the strength of the conference is in the East. So if number 4 Ohio State, as of these rankings, beats number 7 Michigan State and number 6 Michigan, number 6 and 7 are going to both fall. They're not going to come flying back up. They're not going to have a Big 10 championship game to move themselves back up. So, they're playing, it's going to be an elimination. That's why, Bama in the West, Georgia in the East, why you can sit there and have that conversation. I don't like it either. I don't want to see that. But with that being said, the charter of the CFP is to find the 4 best teams. Georgia is certainly a best 4 team. Alabama, okay. I mean, they're flawed, but everybody's flawed to an extent. I mean, we can debate whether or not Georgia is, but Alabama's flawed. But are they a top 4 team? Sure. If Oregon loses, Pac-12's gone. They're done. And Oregon's going to have to probably play Utah twice. I don't think that that's going to survive. So it really is going to create if not Oregon, Cincinnati, if not Cincinnati, Oregon. I don't see a scenario where it's both. If the unthinkable happens, which I don't want to speak into existence, and we see a different Eastern representative in the Big Ten championship game, you'd have to think that their stock would be on the rise. So I don't know. But I really do think that we could see Ohio State sitting 3. And at this point, it means nothing. It means absolutely nothing. I'm looking here, 2014, Week 10, of what they call Week 10, Ohio State was 16 in the CFP rankings. Week 11, Ohio State was 14. And then for whatever reason, they don't have the next whatever weeks. And then we know that Ohio State finished 4th. But, let's look at 20. We'll look at 20. They have weeks 16 and 17 in here. I mean, Ohio State was 4 and then obviously moved up to 3. We'll go to 19. Ohio State's, I'm really disappointed in the college football playoffs website. It used to be much better. Probably should have looked at that before we went on the air. Oh well. The point being, the only rankings that matter are the last ones. After the championship games, where do you rank then? We saw Ohio State sitting 6, and then Ohio State was ranked 4th. And that's all that mattered in 14. And then Ohio State went on to win the whole darn thing. We've seen Ohio State start off highly ranked. Things happen. Things are going to happen. I don't, what I'm sure of is that we're not going to see a situation of where the committee is going to have a rematch of Georgia and Alabama just a couple weeks after they play each other in Atlanta in the SEC championship game. So if Alabama wins, we're not going to see a situation of where they're going to be 2 and 3 or 1 and 4. If they want to have them both in there, one's going to have to be in one game and one's going to have to be in the other game. If Georgia beats Alabama, then we have the debate, is a 2-loss Alabama team better than an undefeated Cincinnati team? Is it better than a 1-loss or 2-loss Oregon team. I mean, certainly better than a 2-loss Oregon team. How does this all work? So that's what makes it so entertaining. And I've seen a lot of people, even some good friends of mine, going out saying, this weekly release and the TV show of college football playoff is dumb. Okay, it can be dumb and enjoyable at the same time. I watch a lot of shows on TV that are dumb and enjoyable, and I watch this. It gives us something to talk about. It gives us something to write about. Not about having less work to do. I mean, we all like the idea of, if I could do less, but, there's an expectation that we do a certain amount of work. So I'm fine with it. I'm fine with it. I mean, I'd like to have my Tuesday evenings, but it's only a couple of weeks that I have to sit there and do that live show, and I get to do it. I don't have to do it. I get to do it. I suggested it internally. I said, we really need to do this show. I think people are interested. And if you're watching this, you're interested. I think. If you're not, let me know in the comments. But, we've gone about 30 minutes, so I want to thank you all for joining us here on this special Monday edition of the Big Me Kickoff. If I get enough good response here, we'll keep doing them. Again, the way I kind of see it is maybe Monday is my recap and Friday is my guest. Just have to track these guys down. That's always the challenge right there, is just making sure that we have good guests that y'all want to hear from. Anything you want to see on the show, anything you want me to talk about, let me know in the comments. I'm going to do a live one of these here soon too, because I enjoy doing that. I like corresponding with our regulars and our newbies that come in and have not seen the show before. But, let me know in the comments what your thoughts are. And, we're going to do this again here this week, I promise. But once again, for Buckeye Scoop and the Big Me Kickoff, I'm your host, Kevin Noon. I want to thank you all for watching and have a fantastic rest of the week.